description is Unlocking the Future, How Emerging Technologies Are Shaping Knowledge Management. I'm Lynda Braksiek, and I'm the research lead for knowledge management here at APQC. And I'm joined by the ever famous Cindy Hubert, our knowledge management fellow today as well. And we are very excited to talk to you today about this topic. Now, for those of you in the United States, I just want to say, I hope you had a happy and safe 4th of July. And for those of you that may be in some hurricane affected areas, we hope that you're safe and dry and that you have internet so that you're joining us today. Our company is based in Houston, Texas. So if you've been following the news, you'll note that we do have part of the city without some power. So we have some contingency plans today, just in case there's a blip in our webinar, but we hope to be able to complete it in its entirety. So bear with us today. Today, our agenda, we're going to go through quite a bit of research and provide you some of our insights based on that research today. We did a study back in February, early March, where we asked questions around emerging technologies for knowledge management. And as you know, with the latest uptick in all of the artificial intelligence, there's a lot of new and interesting things to talk about in this space, while we continue to talk about what's always been evergreen and important to knowledge management. So we're going to share with you some insights. You may have seen some of these insights already if you attended our conference, or maybe a couple other activities at APQC. But today we hope to tell you the rest of the story, because there's some things we haven't shared with you yet. We're going to focus a lot on the role that knowledge management plays in technology. We're going to talk about what are some of those technology priorities and how KM teams are managing them. And we're going to talk about the ever-growing importance of the change management component of technology implementations. How are you getting it across the finish line and helping from an adoption and a buy-in perspective? And then, as always, we have key takeaways and resources for you so that you can feel like you are gaining insights not only from today, but also can take some follow-on action of your own and look up some more research. So with that, are you ready to go, Cindy?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. All right. So first, some key research and insights. Now, most of the research that I'm going to talk through today and that we're going to talk about is based from our technology survey, but we do intertwine some of the things from our priorities survey. We like to always remind you, what did you as our knowledge management audience tell us were your priorities from a business perspective and for your teams, and talk about the alignment between that and technology. So first up, just a quick reminder of what you told us from a top priority perspective. 4 of these 5 have remained very core to knowledge management: transferring knowledge, boosting participation in KM, identifying critical knowledge. New this year in that top 5 was the incorporation of AI and smart technology, not surprising. On the business side of the house, the top business priorities: operational efficiency, process improvement at the top of the list. A lot of that, again, probably driven by some of these new capabilities in AI that are helping us to do this a little bit more effectively. So just keeping some of these priorities in mind as we go forward. This is drivers and barriers to technology that we collected in our technology survey. Now, these don't correlate one-to-one across. That's just showing you what those top 5 drivers and what those top 5 barriers are for KM teams trying to implement technology. The interesting thing is improving knowledge sharing and collaboration, improving productivity and efficiency. Those drivers aren't just for technology. I think they're drivers for KM overall as well, right? So we're very much aligned with everything that we do for KM requires a technology to enable it and support it. So it's really important that we keep these drivers in mind. And even though we're looking at efficiencies and automation using things like AI, we're still really driven for that concept of knowledge sharing and collaboration for our employees.
Lynda, I want to comment real quickly on the #1 driver. It never surprises me, and it sort of delights me that improving knowledge sharing and collaboration is always the top. So it tells you, right, it's that proactive foundational thing for helping knowledge flow. But my question behind that is always, so why are you doing that? And my my hope, and some things I see with some of our members, is you're doing that to do some of the things below, to improve productivity, to reduce risk, to make better decisions. So I think that's just always, yes, while you're doing that, it's not just for the fun and fanfare of it, because we love it, but it's to get business results. And I
It's
think
that
that's
foundational piece, right? It's really
I agree with you. Yeah, I agree. And we're going to talk about it coming up. You've got a few slides coming, but I want people to keep that number 5 on the barrier slide in mind as we go through this. I think that's going to be on the rise over the next year to 18 months.
It is. And
we'll talk about why.
And we've all seen a lot of these barriers, right? So competing with other changes, processes might not be documented. There's a cost. Sometimes we don't know what our vision is, right? Those are, I don't want to say they're common, but they tend to kind of float to the top always from a barrier. But that security and governance concern, really good point, Cindy. That is something that is really coming to the surface because now we know more about how the generative AI technology works, and it's really coming to the top priority for most companies.
Agreed.
This is a reminder from our priority survey as well of what we said in the next 3 years is most important for KM from a technology perspective. Again, not surprising, a lot in the AI space, but look at that number 5, that team collaboration, digital workplace apps, they're still up there. They're foundational to that knowledge sharing component. They can be improved by some of our AI capabilities as well going forward, but it's still a foundational element and always be I would imagine always a top priority for our KM teams.
I agree. Lynda, I don't think the rest is going to work as well if we don't focus on the digital workplace app. We haven't gotten that right yet. We're making great strides, but the other things are not going to work well without it. So pay attention to that number 5 as well.
Yeah, and a little later, we're going to talk a little more detail about what we're using those apps for, and then you'll see why it is so important as well that they work together with a lot of those AI solutions. So this is just some insights from us here at APQC. As we looked across this research that we did on emerging technologies, we just wanted to put some insights on this chart for you. And something new that we're doing in our research is that each time we do a survey with members or even external, we're asking the question, how mature, excuse me, how mature is your KM program within your organization? Now, if you know APQC at all, you know we have a very solid capability assessment tool that we use and that we encourage people to leverage that goes very detailed and very deep into what level your maturity is and using evidence-based approach. For this research, though, I just wanted to point out that this is a self-reported maturity level. It's something we're going to start asking again on every survey. What level do you believe your organization is at? To give us some insights into the data we're collecting, whether mature organizations are doing certain things differently than less mature. And I'm going to point out some of those differences throughout as we talk today, but I just wanted to make sure you have that caveat that this is a self-reported using the same definitions we use for our maturity assessment, but this is simply a self-reported thing. Now, what we saw with the research was that organizations that do have higher levels of KM maturity, self-reported, they're further along in their technology implementations overall. They actually do predict a shorter time to expected benefits for AI. A lot of it is because they're already doing some of it and they're already starting to see some of those benefits. They also benefit from overall investment in technology. They typically have a higher level of investment in their organizations. They have higher levels of leadership support, and they actually invest more and achieve a higher level of change management capability as well. Now, regardless of KM maturity level, what we saw was that the KM teams are involved at about the same level with their digital strategy. Some just might not be as far along as others, but they are involved at around the same rates. And the approach and investment levels for AI right now are very similar, regardless of what level you identified yourself at from a maturity perspective. So everybody's wanting to do something with AI, right? That's what this is telling us. So just a little bit of insights based on the research that we gathered. So we're going to get into our first poll because we want to know from you what else is most concerning for your organization right now. After hearing some of the barriers and the challenges, what else is most concerning related to emerging technology? So these are some of the things we don't talk about quite as much just yet. So we want to hear from you if these are beginning to be a priority.
Well, Lynda, I did a spoiler alert on the security. I talked about it too soon. I forgot we were going. So don't listen to me. Tell me what's really on top of your mind right now. But I just think it's coming. I'm seeing too many things. I see too many unknowns for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it was a good segue into the fact that we're going to be talking about this more in the coming months. And one more thing I forgot to mention earlier too, while you're finishing up your poll, is that while we're reporting out a lot of this research right now, what that means is in the next couple of months, we'll be continuing to create more insights and best practices and research based on this particular set of data. So we've got some interviews lined up with some companies, and we want to really be able to share with you some of those best practices and help you with your implementations as well. So let's go ahead and show the poll here.
Ah, there it is. Oh, yeah.
Look at that. Quality of information is still on top, which doesn't surprise me. They're all important, but that quality of information is something that's so key.
I agree. And, you know, guys, when you all say quality of information, I'm really interested because I think that it's linked to number one, the whole risk of IP and ownership. And I do think generative AI is making us think about these things big time.
I think so.
That's why everybody's creating their own brains these days.
I love that. Their own brains.
Using their own knowledge and data.
That's right. And we're gonna talk a little bit more about that when we get to the AI section. So keep that thought in mind, Cindy, okay?
Thank you, Lynda. Will.
Okay, so we're going to talk just a little bit about the role of KM as well, because we want to keep track of how is the role of knowledge management teams and the knowledge manager changing over time as these technologies continue to advance. So a little bit of data just to show you, here's what people are telling us. Here's what the models are looking like. We're going to show you just a little bit of data based on what we collected in this survey. 43% of people are residing in some sort of an enterprise KM program. A third of people are in that functional, where it's supporting just a specific business unit or a function within their organization. And a quarter of people actually using that federated model, where they do have a centralized KM team, but they also have divisional or functional teams that they're working with and supporting them from the organization. So it's kind of an enterprise plus, right? You know, because they've got those teams within the functions as well. So a lot of people ask us this question, how many people are doing this and which ones are better or worse? It's up to you to decide as an organization what works best for you, but just know that there's multiple ways to manage this. And we do see a lot of benefits of that enterprise function still in our research. So just as a good reminder. But there's a lot of things telling us as well that federated model can give you some flexibility, right? You've got this enterprise approach, but you might do it differently in engineering versus manufacturing versus finance or what have you. So it gives you a little bit of that flexibility. Okay, maturity level. This is that question I told you that we asked from a self-reported perspective. Again, we gave the full definition in the survey, shortened it here for the slide, but this tells you what the people who filled out our survey, where they fall. We have a lot of people just getting started and developing, but we also have quite a few already in the standardizing and optimizing and innovating. So those are the folks that are at that higher maturity level and have got some of these great best practices already started in the area of technology. So excited to keep sharing with you some of those examples as we go forward. Here's that KM involvement in digital strategy. Basically, about 70% of people responding said they're at least moderately involved, which means they're partnering and they have somewhat of a support mechanism or maybe a part of the conversations at least in developing that digital strategy. We do have quite a few still that are 24% are very involved and 10% are extremely involved. So they've got a seat at the table, helping make those decisions from the KM team. So just to give you an idea of the how it's playing out in other organizations. Now, this next slide I found interesting because this is from our priorities survey, and a lot of you have seen this before already. It's what are those top skill sets that we said were important for knowledge management teams to be developing. And for the 4th year in a row, change management's been at the top, and design thinking has been number 2. Design thinking or human-centric design approaches to things. Now, all of these skill sets are a little bit more on the, I'll say, behavioral side, right? Science behind it, but still a little bit more behavioral. How do we critical think and problem solve, partner and collaboration? How do we tell stories? We've got data management in there, which to me correlates to a lot of the content management things that knowledge management teams do as well. But interestingly enough, we put a lot of focus on technology, which is what we're doing for this webinar today. But this is a reminder of where we said our skill sets really do need to reside from a KM perspective. So it's important to understand what's happening in technology, but if you can't get it over the finish line and build adoption and buy-in with the organization and get people to use these capabilities and embrace them as part of the flow of the work they do every day, it's just going to be another new tool sitting there looking pretty, right? So yeah, go ahead, Cindy.
Oh, Lynda, thank you. Saw me. Oh, I'm taking a breath, Lynda. Lynda, so I wanted to let everyone know I just recently had a group of people at APQC who were going through our KM certification. There's a little plug for it. And it's always a fun 3 days together. And one of the things we asked them is, what do you think, what skills do you think are really important? And I think it's always interesting to hear that from people who may be running KM programs or not. They're just there to get a project done or some other thing. But they talk a lot about a change management tactics, I would say, though they don't use that broad thing. And so I think that's always real important to break that down. What do we mean by that? It's huge, right? It's not just being the facilitator, but an influencer, a strategic thinker, helpful, a listener. Those are all really important pieces, I think, for a knowledge manager as part of that change element. So it's big, and I'm always glad to see it at the top. I just think there's so many packed things in those 2 words, change management.
Absolutely. Which is why the 3rd section we're going to talk about today is the change component, right, of technology implementations, because it's become so important.
Skills are important.
The last thing I have to show you on this role of KM is we did a member roundtable just about 3 weeks ago, and it was focused on technology as well in order to gather a little bit deeper data following our research. But we asked the question, how has the role of KM changed within your organization due to recent emerging technologies? And here's what some of the people are saying. Of course, a lot of it was about AI, because we did talk a lot very specifically about AI, but I thought some of these were very interesting. It doesn't surprise me the overall interest of Gen AI is high, and that it's moving from I might want to have some AI to now I must have it in order to be competitive in my business. But the paying attention to KM getting involved, the organizations are really seeing KM as a key player in a lot of these new implementations from a AI technology perspective specifically. And it follows right on the heels of helping through the COVID pandemic and helping get the collaboration tools and everything set up. So it was kind of that perfect segue. And you can see that from the quote. Our chairman, Carla Odell, was in this roundtable with us, and she said, KM involvement in technologies like SharePoint and other collab tools actually set the stage. Right? The company looked around and said, who can help us with AI? And they said, oh, KM is there again, right? They're there again. And we like to call this KM as a first responder. So the company needs us. We're going to step in. We understand the processes and the business across the board. We're going to be able to step in and help. We have those facilitation, those coaching, those collaboration skills, and we're going to bring people together, and we're going to help get everybody up to speed quickly and effectively. So I love that quote because it feels very real. It's happened more than once, I know, in my career and in your career, Cindy, right? And for a lot of you on the call today. But I like that focus. And yeah.
Lynda, I'm going to give you credit. She never takes credit for this. So years ago, we were in an advanced working group together. Carla Odell was there. There were a lot of other organizations working on some things with our programs. Lynda wasn't with APQC. It took us a few years to get her here. But she coined KM is first responder. And we actually studied all the things about first response, good and bad, what happened. And so many learnings came out of that. And a lot of these, Lynda, I think are present here in what people were talking about at the roundtable, and certainly Carla's quote. But it's that proactive, always being ready, always being staged and ready to jump in. So I love that KM as a first responder. Keep that in your mind, because it's a great mantra and really shows your service to the organization. And we have Lynda to thank for that.
Yeah, thank you for that. But yeah, it's keeping that in mind does help whenever there's something happening in the organization that feels a little bit overwhelming. KM usually has a lot of that behavioral side component that can step in and really help people work through solutions with that design thinking and that human-centric approach. So I love it. I love the one here where somebody says, I now have 2 jobs. I'm the KM director and I'm an AI, and I'm also part of an AI startup. You know, and I think how fun. You just continue to expand your skill set. So again, member insights, which I think is fantastic, helps to support a lot of the research that we have with real live examples and what's going on in organizations. So we're going to move now into the next area and talk a little bit more about just those technology priorities for KM in general. And we're going to show you a little bit more data, but I think some of this is pretty exciting, actually. So again, we talked about the workplace apps. We're going to talk in this section about digital workplace apps and collaborative tools, as well as AI. We're going to focus kind of on those 2 areas for the sake of this conversation. Now, our research includes other things like search capabilities and knowledge graphs and things like that. But for today, we're going to focus on these couple. And the reason is, look at this, the extent to which organizations are deploying team collaboration apps, and the KM teams are a part of this, 80%. Right? Or implementing, operating, or optimizing collaborative tools within their organizations. There's very few that aren't doing anything yet or just evaluating. And Cindy, it wasn't that long ago that those numbers were very different. So it's fantastic to see this. The other thing is, before I mentioned, here's what people are using their team and collaboration apps for. In case you're wondering, what exactly are you talking about when we think about things like a Microsoft 365 shop, or maybe it's a Google shop, or whatever tools that you're using for collaboration. These are the things people are doing the most with those tools. Yeah. Content management, right up there, very, very high, which is fantastic. Because as we know, content management is becoming kind of critical in the backbone of making sure that your AI and search capabilities are effective, right? So, and those AI is also helping content management to be more effective. So it's a little bit both directions. Real-time chat, that's keeping that conversation going with people, training, mentoring, communities, best practices, knowledge transfer. These are all the common capabilities that we're using our collaborative tools for. So it becomes very important to be able to surface the information and the knowledge people need, again, in the flow of their work every day so that they can be effective. Now, on to AI. This is where some of the research I'll be showing you, I'm separating out a little bit whether or not people reported themselves as a early mature, from a KM perspective, organization, or a more mature organization. Because there was enough of some differences, I wanted to be able to point that out to you. Now, maturity can speak to longevity, the size of your team, you have more budget, you have better leadership buy-in, things like that. That typically helps to drive the maturity level. But for AI, mature organizations are deploying them at a little bit higher level. Others are still doing it, but they're not mature, they're not deploying it at quite the same level. And as you can see, those lower mature organizations are actually they have quite a few more that are not considering it right now. So I find that a little bit interesting as well. A lot evaluating and piloting still. And then on the other end, you can see we have more of those mature organizations actually in the operational mode and optimizing existing solutions and seeing value already. So a little bit of a difference there.
Lynda, I want to encourage people, because I tell you what, don't fool yourself. I mean, I understand this is self-reported saying, you know, we don't have it going on, what have you. I think somebody is doing that in your organization. You just may not know about it. You all are, most of you are in massive organizations. So seek out what's being done. There's a lot of what I like to call random acts of AI going on, both probably as part of what people know about, and then things that people don't know about. I mean, I know a lot of people are using it in their personal lives. So again, I just encourage you, just ask a lot of questions and try to find out, because I think, you know, you got to stay up with it, and it is going to be quantum in terms of its impact. It's happening.
Absolutely. Is there anything, I haven't been following the chat as much, Cindy, but I see that you are. Is there anything
Absolutely. You know what? Just all the way from, let's see, Michelle King was telling us that she likes what MS is doing with the Loop app. She said it acts similar to the wiki, but better. We were talking about that. And a lot on change management, Lynda. They're going to love your section on change, because it's about just having, you know, all the things that we talked about, humility, soft skills related to leadership, being vulnerable. So a lot of good stuff there.
Absolutely. I feel like all of our webinars, we end up touching on change management regardless of what we're talking about lately, right? So, but
absolutely,
with it being the top skill set that KM teams are focused on, I feel like we need to try to help gather those best practices from you that are listening, as well as us share any that we have that we've gained from talking to members and our own experiences. So
agreed. And Aaron just said they're struggling to get executive sponsorship. Aaron, do we understand that? That runs the gamut regardless of what maturity level. You may have it, you got to keep it, right? And we're going to talk about that in just a few minutes and share some data with you.
Well, and even if you have that sponsorship, it can change overnight, right? So you have to deal with sometimes the ever-changing. So,
people leave and move around.
So some of the things we've been talking about in our research, and I know we've talked a little bit about this at the conference, but now we have a little bit more of specific examples too, is we talk about those common use cases. So the box at the top are those things that identified in our our survey is what are you either doing or expecting to use AI for, right? Here's some of the common things: automating, tagging, improving customer support, personalization, things like that. Some examples I listed below were from our roundtable, and I thought they were really good to really pinpoint what exactly does that mean to automate? What exactly does that mean to, you know, improve customer support? So I love the examples like surfacing answers from one company who uses an enterprise wiki. And there's a lot of information out of there. Now they're using AI to surface those most important pieces of content and summarize things. Chatbots are being used to support end user, service desk, enhanced search. I like the last one. One company said they're using it to create an RFP library. They're surfacing the content and creating a library of some standard ways, right? Some standard templates that you can use to create a library of RFP, so people don't have to start from scratch, right? The summarization of meetings and surfacing some of those pieces of content that you might have to create FAQs. Great idea. Creating content for newsletters and other communications, you know, improving your ability to write maybe a little bit more concisely and effectively by using some Gen AI. Somebody also mentioned the lessons learned capability. They're using it to surface lessons and then create those an actual platform that then pushes out lessons to the rest of their organization, which I thought was amazing. And then of course the, you know, categorization of information from retrospectives, which I thought was amazing. This is a company who does retrospectives very well and on a regular basis so that they can gain from those learnings, and they're categorizing those comments and then surfacing that information back again to the organization. So lots of great examples. Again, if you're wondering, what does that mean when I do that? Here's some good examples from other companies who are already doing these things. And I feel like I had a comment in here where somebody said they were using it to create some content, and they basically said, but the jury's still out. I'm not sure yet if it's as good as what we need it to be, right? So it's this continual improvement and being agile and saying, you know what, you might not get it right the first time, but you keep trying and you can get it to that place where it can be effective for the organization.
The machine's learning too, Lynda. That's what we have to remember. So I have to ask the group on with this. So you guys, here's one. I'm dying for somebody to try this. I've got a couple of you out there who said we're going to. I don't know if you have or not. I want somebody to take AI and run it back through. If you've done lessons learned for several years, regardless if they're decentralized or in a centralized repository, whatever, I want you to run AI through there to find all the redundant lessons learned, because I have a theory. I think we quote We say we learn them, but all we really do is document them. We may or may not know it or the right person. And then we do the same thing over again and recapture the same lessons learned. I think that's gone on for years. And I would love to use AI, I think, as a deep analysis of your existing lessons learned, because again, the problem's not the technology. It's that, yeah, we've learned that, we heard it, we captured it, we put it somewhere, but change or action didn't happen out of it. And so many people have done such great jobs of trying to prevent that from happening. But I'm just curious. So if you've done that, let me know, please.
I just put a note out there and said, this is a great challenge for everybody doing AI. If they need another use case, do this, please, and let us know, because
Absolutely.
I think that would help you with the, prioritization of where do we go focus. If we can only do 3 things based on all of our lessons learned, let's find the ones that we're doing the most often, and let's prioritize. Because if it's going to find redundancy, you can take those. This happened 112 times in the last 5 years. Well, let's go fix that. So I think that'd be very helpful.
Don't you think? I do too. I really love that. And it just, what it means to me is that, yeah, thank you, Carolyn Hackney. I agree with you. We're just checking it needs to be actionable, and it needs to transfer. It's telling me that you're making it, you're capturing it, you're telling it, you're making it accessible. But if people aren't using it or putting it into play and things are changing and you do the same thing over again, but maybe in a different way, you've got a problem.
Absolutely.
I think it could be a huge win.
It's a great challenge too. I can't wait to hear back from somebody who's on the call today.
If you'll call me.
That challenge on.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Reach out. Okay. Investment. So the AI investment levels that we're seeing now, according to our KM respondents, compared to what they expect to see in the next 3 years, quite different. So we have people who are, of course, not investing at all now, and that's understood. But look at the expectations over the next 3 years for how much we're going to increase. 45% of people said they're going to increase a lot their investment. We never get that answer in anything when we ask for what are you increasing your investment in? It's never, we get very few that it's a lot. 45%. That tells you how important this is becoming for organizations and for their competitiveness. So again, investment levels, not really different, even based on maturity levels in our organizations, which is why I didn't split it out. This is very across the board. This is where people are wanting to spend their time. So, okay. Here's our benefits conversation. So we like to ask the question, the expected benefits, and this is from our research, and none of this is probably surprising to you. We want to reduce that redundant and siloed work. We want to streamline, make better decisions, improve content management, and that last one on quality, information management quality, which we saw earlier in that first question we actually asked you. You said the quality of your information is really important. The interesting thing is now we're really trying to hone in on what are we actually seeing. So these are our expected benefits. Going forward, you will see us talking more about what benefits are you actually gaining. And we're going to ask you that question here in just a second. So keep that in mind. First, I'm going to show you, though, what people are saying about the time to the expected benefit that they're anticipating for their organizations. And this is where we had a little bit of a difference based on maturity level. Again, higher level maturity, they expect or are already seeing benefits or expected a little sooner, probably because they're further ahead in the implementation process, right? So this is not too surprising. But it's still a very quick turnaround expectation of benefit. Less than a year already right now. Cindy, when we asked this question at our conference in 2023, I think the more the answers were more in the further year, 1 to 2, 3 years out. So now we're in this place now where it's less than a year and it's already happening. So we are moving the needle in most organizations and pretty quickly. Now, again, there's going to continue to be benefits as we go forward. We're going to find out new things. We're going to learn lessons. We're going to make mistakes, all of those things. But a lot of benefit expected pretty quickly.
Yeah. Lynda, I think going back to our comment about just the digital workplace, I just want to connect those two for our audience today. I think that you're going to have to get the digital workspace real solid and foundational for this to work well. And so I don't know, can you run that parallel track? Probably so, but be real conscious of what's going on already as terms of your foundation of how you're providing people all that digital access, collaboration, tools, templates, what that looks like, as well as the content in it. Again, this gets back to people that I see creating their own internal generative AI machines, that they're using that to just go internal to exclude the external. And so,
Yep.
yeah, I think, it made me, Lynda, it makes me wind the clock back to benchmarking. When we started out 30 years ago, before then, doing benchmarking, everybody just wanted to do internal benchmarking. And our founder, Jack Grayson, as you know, said, no, you're missing out on best practices. You don't know. And so I think that maybe there's some things we can learn from that in terms of that internal, and how do you bring the external in? I think you got to get good at that internal piece, and it includes both the generative AI and the digital workspace, and really understanding that. And KM is so fit to enable that and be at the strategy table for it, because you got to have the people and process side.
I agree. And I love what you said, talking about the internal, right? Building your own internal brain first before, and focusing internal before you go external. But don't you think the external too is where you really start to gain the innovative pieces, and because you're taking the best of outside and inside, and you're trying to then create something that's, you can't just innovate if you're only looking at your own stuff, right? Internally, you have to look at what's going on outside your organization and even outside your industry. Some of the best practices we've ever learned over the years have been looking at other industries and what they're doing, not just our own industry. So that external piece is that, to me, that's that next level where you truly get to the R&D and the innovative benefits that you can gain from using something like artificial intelligence. But we have to be careful. We have to think about the security and the IP and all of those things, and build it internally really, really well. So
absolutely. Great. And Lynda, in the chat, I just want to Joseph has such a great comment. He said we don't talk about our KM in terms of projects or initiatives, but in terms of business transformation. Joseph, I love that. And you're right. It requires the conversation that says, we can do all this to help you, but you may have to change your ways of working. And absolutely, you may have to do something different to really get the full value. And I do think that elevates you to that higher strategic level that leaders are typically willing to invest in. It's tangible.
And yeah, thank you, Joseph. Just a little plug. We're going to be doing a little interview with Joseph and another team member at Novartis. So we're going to have some best practices from them to share in the next couple of months, because they're doing some amazing things. So they do. And we already have a case study that we just did with their team last year, a full-on case study of their whole program. So if you're interested, in check it out on our resource library. It's
Joseph, you can't back out now. She's put you on point with everybody.
That's right. That's right. So they're doing some great things. So great comments. Thank you, Joseph. Okay, we're going to do a quick poll again, because we do want to talk about those benefits. We want to hear from you. Yes, this is a poll, and we have some specific things called out. What are some of those tangible benefits that you're currently seeing, not expected, currently seeing in anybody who's doing AI implementation? But also, if you have an example, share it in the chat. Right? Let's get deep. Okay, so you're enhancing search capabilities. What is that? What does that look like? Give us some examples, because we capture all this information and share it after the fact, from a theme perspective. So it really does help people. Absolutely.
Lynda, I think the big one for APQC, I'll just tell them this while they're responding. Creation of new content. We're really not getting to do that because of our original research and just still the uncertainty and everything. So I'm really interested to see if people have figured out how to create content. It may be that more internal focus on all your own content and data, not pulling in from the external. And I get that.
Yep, easily. I do too. Yeah. So
it gives you ideas for new content. I know one of our members, it was interesting, used generative AI and just looked from a public perspective and said, what else should APQC be researching? And it gave this huge long list. And I was like, well, whoa, whoever thought of that? So I love it.
You got to send that to me, Cindy.
I will get him to send
or I'll go look for it myself.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Except I have found if everyone has used generative AI that there are certain words that it loves. So it reuses some of the same words.
Yes.
Yeah.
Delve.
Yes.
Delve is one word. Have any of you found that it uses delve? Because I never used delve before. And so every time I try to just improve my paragraph, it puts that word in there. I'm like, oh, okay.
I know. Isn't that funny? Okay, let's close this poll and see what we've got going on here from a benefits perspective. And hopefully if people are putting...
Oh, we do. We have a good one in the chat. So Sarah, thank you. One example of new content generation is we're using long form knowledge assets to create answers in a conversational teammate assistant. Ooh, Sarah, boy, could that help a call center rep? Yeah. Love it.
I may have to call Sarah too and do a little interview to find out how that's working.
Yeah, Alan, beginning to use it for assisting in creating briefings, training, and exec level summaries. Yeah, Alan, assuming that's your content, it's grabbing in there.
Yeah, nice. That's amazing. You know, looking at the poll results, it's
oh my gosh,
we're not doing as much of the, you know, access to expertise and upskilling things just yet. It's more about the creation of content and efficiencies, and that's I would expect that is the more common things to go after first. The improved customer and client support, I feel like we have a lot in that space normally as well, so maybe it's just this audience doing that as much, but it's being used quite heavily in the customer support organization.
It really is. Lynda, look, 33% are not using it.
Yeah.
And guys, don't feel like you're left behind. I think you've got a lot of early innovators, some early adopters that are wanting to have very specific. I think you have to have really specific business reasons to put it in place. I think if you just come in and say, oh, let's just go try it and use it, you're going to be disappointed. And then you're going to realize how upset you are about your data organization and the quality of it. It'll highlight a lot of stuff for you.
And continue to come to things like this and read some of the articles that are out there inside of our organization, but also in other places. You're going to see a lot of best practices, people who are going to do the work ahead of you, and they're going to help you when you do decide to use it at some point in the future. So that's great. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. And just guys, on the content management, very few of you said, just 6% said enhanced content management capabilities. Yeah, me too. I know it's there, and I'd love examples of those of you who have used it for content management and what you're doing. I think streamlining processes is one thing, and taking out some of the routine, but it's still that eyeball on your knowledge and content that you need, the human.
Okay, so I love one of the comments. I have to Lauren Hayes in the chat said, delve and overuse of emojis is a giveaway. Which I think is hilarious. So
I'm glad you got that too. Delve is a funny word, right? It's good. I just don't use it.
It is. I actually like the word, and I use it very sparingly, so I'm not very happy that AI is using it all the time, because I feel like it's taking it away to be able to use it once in a while. But I know.
Be nice to your AI. I was mean to mine, and they don't like it.
Okay, we're going to close out our conversation talking about change management for emerging tech. And we did ask quite a few questions on change management in our survey so that we could focus on this. So again, these questions are all aimed at change management specifically for technology implementation. So just keep that in mind as we talk about this. Here's a place where we saw quite a bit of difference, and that's in the investment, and then you'll see the capabilities here in a second. But depending on your level of maturity, the lower level of maturity KM organizations are not investing quite as much yet in change management. We hope that that's building over time as they begin to develop their program a little bit more. Not at all invested. 15% of people said we're not at all invested in change management. So hopefully something we can continue to move that bar on as part of a mature KM organization. Change management and communications are a key part of making sure that you're successful with a holistic program. So it will be important to stay focused. But 59% of our more mature organizations said they're at least moderately invested in change management. So people getting training, people with the skill sets, applying the techniques to the organization. So that's good news. The effectiveness, this is where we see a lot of difference. The more mature organizations have 61% that are at least moderately effective at change, and the less mature 41% are at least moderately effective. So quite a difference in the ability to be effective with their technology implementations as it relates to the behavioral component, right, and the adoption. So just, again, something for us to stay focused on. Here's the top 5 barriers listed to change management. Quite a big jump from number 1 to number 2, honestly. Look at that. 47, almost half the people that responded said, can't get people adopted. They're not engaging. We're not adopting, which means, again, I keep saying that, getting it over the finish line. If we don't have adoption and engagement, have we truly implemented our solution? Maybe partially, maybe in a small perspective, but will you be back fixing it or re-implementing or getting rid of it and wasting that investment over time if you're not focused on the adoption and engagement? So big barrier. And this is where we need to start spending more of our time. Leadership and sponsorship, somebody mentioned it in the chat, always a challenge, still a challenge. Some folks do it extremely well, and we do have some case studies and things like that to support some of that. I think sometimes for people, it's the hardest to just get a sponsor that first time, or you have a sponsor, but they're not very effective. So how do you help them to become more effective? Things like that. And of course, we always have the competition with other changes. That is constant right now, right? It is going to go on forever and ever. That's not going to change. So we need to learn how to deal with that disruption and help our change maybe stand out a little bit more. So those are some barriers. Anything else you think of, throw it in the chat, right? We love to hear other things. I mean, there were more barriers in the list. I just put the top 5 in there for the sake of this. Now, communication methods, the reason I threw this out here is to make a very specific point. And that is, if you look at this, the maturity levels, most of these are pretty even across the board. Everybody does town halls, emails. They use peers to lead communications because that's very effective, and those are all great practices. Videos, podcasts, great practices. Two-way communication. This is where the more mature organizations had a little bit of an advantage, which is probably why they're more effective at change as well. Two-way communication mechanisms are so critical because if you're not making sure that people are buying what you're selling, understand how it impacts their day, understand that what's in it for me, feel that they have the skills to be effective in this new way of working that you're asking them to do, they're going to simply just walk away or revert back to their old behavior or resist altogether. So when you put those two-way communication mechanisms in place, you're collecting their fears. You're getting the feedback on what's working and what's not working. These are some of the most critical things that you can do to start ensuring that your adoption begins to build. And that's the reason I wanted to call this one out, was to say, I think our mature organizations are a little bit ahead of the curve on that two-way communications, and things like communities work for that. It's a great place to have dialogue, right? Putting coaching and mentoring programs in place, applying lessons, not just capturing them, but applying them and having those conversations. So doing retrospectives, things like that.
Absolutely. Lynda, I have to say this, you're gonna groan, and our colleague Darcy Lemons, who's on, is gonna groan, but I learned from one of our members over 20 years ago the best methodology for communication, and I'll put this in the chat, guys, but it's awareness, which is more of that one-to-one. You're trying to do 4 things. One is create awareness, and that's usually the starting point. It's one-to-many, here's what's going on, to start getting people engaged and interested. The second one is understanding, and that's where that two-way communication comes in. But in, again, that broader sense of just help people bake it in and understanding. It takes time, not, hey, we've just implemented and in 2 days you're going to change the way you've done. The third step is commitment, and I think we often forget that, because the fourth step is action, and we're all trying to get to action, right, when it comes to adoption and participation. But we go from hey, here it is to now take action, and people can't do that. So awareness, understanding, commitment, and action. And I'll put that in the chat because I love it. And Paul actually said a really interesting thing in the chat. Paul, I have to get to what you just said. He said, rushing, where is Paul here? Because he was just
I
talking
see it.
about it. Yes, a key barrier is over-reliance on communication as a way to change behavior. And I think that makes my point, Paul. I agree with you. I think you've got to really dig deeper with what
Absolutely.
Lynda said, communities, one-on-ones, focus groups, and have more of a conversation opposed to just that one-to-many communication.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about all the components of change here in just a second, Paul. So I'm so glad you said that, because I always say to people, communication does not equal change. It's simply one piece of the puzzle, right? There are other pieces going on. And your model that you mentioned before, Cindy, reminds me of, if anyone is familiar with the ProSci model, the ADKAR components, right? The awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. It kind of has all of those components in there as well, which is a great way to think about change too. So, okay, quickly, one more piece of research for you all here. And this is about the leadership sponsorship effectiveness. Again, people are always talking about can't get sponsorship, can't get them to, even if you have a sponsor, are they doing anything? Are they supporting it? And the number one area of improvement is really just support the change, make time, make sure you're supporting it with budget and resources. You know, we have the leading by example. We definitely need to measure it. They need to communicate effectively. All of these other behaviors are really important for a leader and a sponsor to be effective. But the number one thing by far is just support the change. And the one thing that I will say to that, just based on my own experience and research on change management, is they don't always know how to do that. So it's our jobs as change practitioners and change champions to help them to be effective, empower them with the right communications and the right pieces of information they need to know, the feedback coming from the organization, so they can say and support with the right information, because what they say matters. And if they don't know what to say, if they don't have all the information they need, they can't be effective. And the more they know, the better they'll understand the value, which means they will commit the time, they will commit the budget, and they will commit the resources, right? But it's a two-way street. We can't just expect them to know and understand everything happening with our change, because they're dealing with a lot of stuff. So I always say, have a little bit, walk a day in their shoes and help them to understand what it might be like to have to support 15 different things in one day. Give them what they need, empower them to be as effective as they can be. So that's just my one little editorial on that. Okay, a couple more things left before we end. Because we're talking about change, I do want to make sure that you understand there are several components of change. We have a great change toolkit and lots of change resources in our resource library at APQC. And of course, all of you who have been trained in change through different methodologies probably have a lot of tools and resources available to you as well. We're fairly agnostic when it comes to methodologies, other than to say you need to have one. You need to have a framework and a methodology in your organization and do it consistently so that you have the structure and resources to be effective. And I'm sorry, I forgot to flip the slide, didn't I?
Thank you,
That was
Lynda.
my bad.
Yeah,
I'm
thanks.
sorry, I forgot to
That's
do that.
okay.
Sometimes I get excited looking at the other screen and I do that. So again, the components of change, think about all of these things. This is more the science part of change. Change is a lot of art and behavioral and soft skills, but you do actually need some structure and resources. You need to help your leaders understand their roles and responsibilities as it comes to guiding people through the change. You definitely need to have communications, right? But a lot of people think that change is communications and training and we're done. And all that does is really tell me what you need me to do and you give me some training, but I don't understand why. I don't understand how it impacts my processes or my day-to-day work. So I'm not engaged. I don't feel effective. I don't have support from my leadership. So you need all of these components. And when you do identify the type of behavior that you're looking to change, this is how we're going to work now. This is the new tool set we're going to use. Make sure people understand those expectations and then reward those people who are actually behaving in the manner in which we expect, and follow through on some of those rewards and recognition so that people can see that and they can feel good about the fact that this was really hard, but my company appreciates what I'm doing because now I'm doing it the way we need to go forward and to be competitive and all of that. So go ahead.
Lynda, I want to just connect the two because a few people have commented about leadership. And so I love this scientific view of what the leadership needs to do, what their role is. But going back to then the art of getting their support, I think you've really got to understand what your leaders are invested in. What is it that they need to get done? And if you don't come in with that really good understanding of your business, the business model, where change is happening anyways, what they're interested in, and tie your efforts to that. I think whether you're not as mature or even the very mature, always have to be on top of that. That's the number one driver of all of our capabilities, right? The case for action, the business case.
Absolutely.
And you've got to constantly have that. So I think just my advice would be just go out and really understand what their central focus is and how would your efforts tie to that and make it better.
I love that. And, you know, the comments from Joseph, he's talking about the behavioral science principles. Couldn't agree more. We obviously did not go into that today, but just a little plug. We do have a managing change course now at APQC, and I think I'm teaching it virtually for the first time in September. So I'm really excited. Taught it at the conference and it went over really well. We're adjusting it for virtual. So if you're interested in something like that, please take a look. And we'll have some future webinars too this year that we're going to talk a couple different times about change management. So very important topic for us to keep focused on, and it'll give us an opportunity to talk a little bit more on that behavioral side, Joseph, because we do need to focus on that piece as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so we just have about 4 minutes left, so I'm going to make sure we get this wrapped up. We do have some just effective practices. We talk about measuring a lot, and these are just some reminders on how we need to think about measuring. You know, agree up front what success looks like. It's okay to take a phased approach. You're not going to get them all right the first time, right? You're not going to get all your measures right. You need to have technical, behavioral, and value, meaning business. How is it impacting the business bottom line? You got to have all of those components. Things like storytelling and qualitative surveys are really important, but how is it impacting the business? And the technical component, which is really how well is this change actually working, right? How many hits are we getting? How many people are using it? You got to have all of those things. And just be aware that how it drives behavior. It's important, and make sure that you're delivering these measures in a way that resonates with leaders. Like Cindy said, understand the business, speak in their language, speak in the terms of value for them.
Tell your story, right?
Yeah, tell your story. Absolutely.
Tell the rest of it. Thank you, Nancy Allen. I'm glad you are focusing on it. I don't think we do it well. We forget.
And just a couple of key takeaways before we end, because we get to the end and we get so excited talking about all this, we could keep going for hours. But Cindy, you already talked about this, understanding the business need. These are just some things to think about. Technology disruptions are commonplace now. Here are some proven things that you can think about as you move forward with any technology implementation, whether it's AI or new collaborative tools or a new search or whatever it is you're doing. You must understand the business need. Why are we doing this in the first place? You do need to make sure that your quality or your content is of a quality nature, because everything we do in technology seems to be pulling from our existing data and content. And what we're finding out is that it's not always really structured very well, right? And then we can't leverage some of these new capabilities. So you need to be thinking about your content management. And then, as always, focus on that impact to the people, like what we just talked about with change, and deal with those upskilling needs. What are the skills that the people need who are implementing the change, as well as the people who are being impacted by the change? It could be both, could be just one, but know what they are. What are the skills needed to be effective in this new environment? And make sure that those are there. And then I included a great quote from Miss Cindy Hubert, who's on the call with us
Lynda,
today.
Advance it one more time. I think we're getting a little bit of a delay. We're still on technology disruptions.
Yep, that's where I was at.
There you are. Thank you. Mine was late. I'm sorry.
Perfect. Oh yeah, no, that's okay. You're in Texas. You're getting that slow response probably still.
I'm sorry.
Okay, and then just finally, we like to always close out by telling you that there's a lot of upcoming engagements, and we just talked a lot about technology, and I'll let Cindy say a final word here, but I want to remind you that, you know, we're going to be focusing a lot on engagement, change management, hitting it hard again this year with communities of practice, because it's such a value added capability proven, evergreen. We call it the killer app of knowledge management. And we want to make sure that we're staying focused on things like communities of practice, as well as all of this exciting new technology that's going on. So these are some of the upcoming engagements, including a KM certification and a roundtable that we have coming up again next quarter. So with that, that is where I will end. And I will, Cindy, if you have any final words of wisdom for our audience as we leave.
Oh, Lynda, I think, you know what, just get in and do it. Go, let's see, I'm going to borrow one of our members who says they used to have to bring their own folding chair to the strategic table where all the leaders sit, and now they have a permanent chair because they got in and they were helpful. And so I think that's the best piece of advice. Drag your folding chair there until you can get a permanent seat at the table.
Absolutely correct.
Thanks for being with us, guys.
Thank you so much, guys. And you will receive a email with a link to this webinar. And we will also create a summary of this webinar in written form within the next 4 to 6 weeks that will be available in our resource library. Thank you and have a wonderful rest of your day.